The blade was cold against Aisling's tongue. She could taste the iron before it even pierced her flesh, could feel the Alpha's grip tightening in her hair as he yanked her head back, exposing her throat to the gathered wolves. "You dare speak lies in my pack." Alpha Cormac's voice thundered across the stone courtyard. "You dare claim my son as your own." 300 wolves watched in silence. Not one stepped forward. Not one challenged the judgment. Aisling's tears fell freely, but she did not beg. She had stopped begging 3 days ago, when they dragged her from the servants' quarters. When they stripped her of her clothes and dressed her in the rough grey sack of a condemned liar. The Luna, Siobhan with her golden hair and cruel smile, stood at her mate's side, one elegant hand resting on the shoulder of a small boy. A boy with Aisling's eyes. A boy who hadn't spoken a single word in all 6 years of his life. "Proceed," Cormac commanded. The executioner, a scarred wolf named Declan, stepped forward with his curved blade raised. But before steel could meet flesh, before blood could spill onto the ancient stones, a small voice shattered 5 years of silence. "Mother, now before we go deeper into this story, I need you to do something for me. If you're already feeling something, if your heart just skipped, I want you to drop a comment right now. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. Because this story, it's going to break you. It's going to rebuild you. And you're going to want to be here for every single moment. Now let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand how Aisling ended up with a blade at her tongue and the words of her stolen son ringing across the courtyard, you need to understand how she fell in love with the cruelest Alpha in all of Ireland. 7 years before the trial, Aisling O'Brien was nothing. That's not poetry, that's fact. In the rigid hierarchy of the Blackmore pack, she existed somewhere below the Omega Wolves and just above the Kitchen Rats. An orphan with no family line to trace, no wolf blood to claim, no reason for anyone to look at her twice. She was 19 years old. She was human. And she was completely invisible. The Blackmore pack had ruled the western coast of Ireland for 17 generations. Their territory stretched from the cliffs of Maher to the ancient forests of County Clare, and their stone fortress, built into the very bones of the land, had stood since before the English ever set foot on Irish soil. Alpha Cormac Blackmore was the 28th Alpha of his line. At 32, he was considered young for the position, but no one questioned his right to lead. His father had died in the border wars, and Cormac had stepped into the role with a cold efficiency that made the other packs nervous. He was tall, taller than any wolf Aisling had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun and eyes the color of a winter storm. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the battle that killed his father. The wolves whispered that he had held his father's body as the old Alpha took his final breath. They whispered that Cormac had howled for 3 days straight, and when he finally stopped, something in him had died too. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He didn't look at anyone longer than absolutely necessary. And he certainly didn't look at human servant girls who scrubbed his floors. At least that's what Aisling believed. Until the night of the winter solstice. The great hall was transformed for the celebration. Evergreen boughs hung from the rafters, woven with strands of holly and ivy. Massive iron chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the stone walls, and the long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, and honeyed cakes. Aisling worked in the shadows, as always. Her job was to keep the wine flowing, to move between the celebrating wolves with pitchers of the deep red vintage that the Alpha favored, refilling cups before they ran empty. She was good at being invisible. Years of practice had taught her how to move without being seen, how to keep her eyes down and her presence unremarkable. But tonight something was different. She felt eyes on her. Every time she turned, every time she lifted her head, she caught the Alpha staring. No, not staring. Studying. Like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. It made her nervous. Alphas didn't look at servants. And when they did, it rarely ended well. She tried to avoid his end of the hall. She focused on the lower tables, where the younger wolves were too drunk on wine and celebration to notice one more human face among the staff. But the Blackmore fortress wasn't that large. And eventually his cup ran empty. "Girl." The word cut through the noise of the celebration like a blade through silk. Aisling froze mid-step, her pitcher heavy in her hands. "Yes, Alpha. Come here." She approached the high table with her heart pounding so hard she was certain every wolf in the room could hear it. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, on the hem of his dark robes, on anything but his face. "Look at me." She raised her eyes. Close, he was even more terrifying. The scar was silver in the firelight, and his gray eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. But there was something else there too. Something she hadn't expected. Deep old festering pain. "What's your name?" he asked. "Aisling, Alpha. Aisling O'Brien." "Aisling," he repeated, and the way he said it, slow, careful, like he was tasting each syllable, made heat bloom in her cheeks. "That means dream, doesn't it?" "Yes, Alpha." He held out his cup. "Pour." She filled it with trembling hands, certain she would spill. But the wine flowed true, and when she stepped back, she found him still watching her. "You're human," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, Alpha. Why do you stay? In a place like this, among wolves who see you as less than nothing?" The question surprised her. No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever cared enough to wonder. "I have nowhere else to go," she answered honestly. "The pack took me in when I was a child. They gave me food and shelter. I owe them my service." "You owe them nothing," he said, and there was an edge to his voice that she didn't understand. "You're a servant, not a slave. You're free to leave whenever you choose." "And go where?" She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. Too bold. Too direct. Servants didn't question Alphas. But instead of anger, she saw something flicker across his face. Something that might have been respect. "Anywhere," he said. "The world is larger than these walls, Aisling O'Brien. You don't have to spend your life scrubbing floors for wolves who wouldn't notice if you disappeared tomorrow." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. After a long moment, he turned away, lifting his cup to his lips. "You're dismissed." He fled. But that night, lying on her thin pallet in the servants' quarters, she couldn't stop thinking about his words. About the way he had looked at her. Like she was real, like she mattered. It was the most dangerous thing anyone had ever done to her. Because for the first time in 19 years, Aisling O'Brien had been seen. Started slowly. A glance across the great hall. A brush of fingers when she poured his wine. A single word spoken in passing that held more meaning than 1,000 conversations. Aisling tried to convince herself it was nothing. The Alpha was merely being kind to a servant. A strange kindness perhaps, but nothing more. But then the gifts started appearing. First, a warm cloak left outside her door in the dead of winter. Heavy wool lined with fur. Nicer than anything she had ever owned. Then a book of poetry. Handwritten, ancient, bound in leather so soft it felt like skin. She couldn't read well, but she taught herself, sounding out each word by candlelight until the verses lived in her heart. Then a silver brush for her hair. A pair of leather boots that fit perfectly. A delicate chain with a pendant of moonstone that seemed to glow in the darkness. Each gift came without a note. Without an explanation. But she knew who sent them. And slowly, terrifyingly, she began to understand what was happening. The Alpha of the Blackmore pack was courting her. Human. A servant. Nothing. She tried to stop it. She tried to stay away, to avoid his eyes, to fade back into the invisibility that had protected her for so long. But he found ways. He would appear in the corridors when she was alone, asking questions about her day, about her thoughts, about the books she was reading. He would linger by the kitchen doors when she took the scraps to the compost heap, and they would talk for hours beneath the stars. He never touched her. Never so much as took her hand. But the way he looked at her, God's the way he looked at her, made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. "Why me?" she finally asked him. one night when the moon was full and his eyes had shifted to the gold of his wolf. You could have anyone. Any she-wolf in any pack would be honored to be your Luna. Why are you wasting your time with me? Cormac was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because you're the first person in 5 years who looked at me and didn't see a monster. You're not a monster. I am. He turned to face her, and there was something broken in his expression. I've done terrible things, Aisling. I've killed men with my bare hands. I've made decisions that haunt me in the dark. I am everything they whisper about and worse. Then why? Because when you look at me, you see past all of it. You see the man I could have been. The man I want to be. He reached out, and for the first time his fingers brushed her cheek. You make me want to be better. She should have run. She should have remembered her place, her station, the 1,000 reasons why this could only end in tragedy. But instead she leaned into his touch. And for one perfect moment she let herself believe. The first time they kissed, the world fell away. It was 3 months after the winter solstice, in the private garden behind the fortress where the first spring flowers were beginning to bloom. Aisling had gone there to think, to escape the whispers of the other servants who had begun to notice the Alpha's attention. She didn't expect him to find her, but he always found her. They're talking about us, she said when he approached. The whole pack is talking. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're the Alpha. They can't touch you. She turned away, hugging herself. But I'm just a servant. If they decide I've reached above my station, they could. They won't touch you. His voice was iron. Anyone who raises a hand against you will answer to me. You can't protect me forever. I can. He moved closer, and she felt the heat of him at her back. I will. Cormac. Say it again. She turned to face him, confused. What? My name. Say it again. She realized then that she had never used his name before. Always Alpha. Always the title, never the man beneath it. Cormac, she whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was 5 months of longing poured into a single moment, and Aisling felt herself dissolving into it, becoming something new in the furnace of his touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were pure gold. I want you as my Luna, he said. I want you beside me now and always. I want to give you my mark, my pack, my life. I'm human. I don't care. I can't give you an heir. Our children would be. I don't care about heirs. I care about you. He took her face in his hands. Say yes. Say you'll be mine. Every rational thought screamed at her to refuse. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was the real world. And in the real world, human servants didn't become Luna to the most powerful Alpha in Western Ireland. But when she looked into his eyes, when she saw the desperate hope beneath the iron control, she couldn't find the strength to deny him. Yes, she said, and sealed her fate. The announcement was made at the spring equinox. Alpha Cormac Blackmore stood before his pack and declared that he had chosen his mate. Not a daughter of one of the noble wolf families. Not a strategic alliance with a neighboring pack. A human servant. The reaction was explosive. Half the pack was outraged. How dare he insult their heritage by choosing a creature without a wolf? How dare he elevate a floor scrubber to the position once held by great she-wolves of legend? The other half was cautiously supportive. The Alpha's word was law, and if he had chosen this human girl, there must be a reason. Perhaps she was more than she appeared. But no one was more furious than Lady Siobhan of the Silverwood pack. Siobhan was everything Aisling was not. Born to privilege, raised in luxury, gifted with a wolf so powerful that she had been groomed from childhood to be a Luna. Her pale gold hair fell to her waist in perfect waves, and her green eyes held the calculating intelligence of a predator. She had been promised to Cormac since the age of 16, an arrangement between their fathers, sealed with blood and oaths. When the old Alpha died, she had waited patiently for Cormac to fulfill his obligation. For 5 years she had waited. And now he had chosen a human. The insult was unforgivable. "She's enchanted him," Siobhan told anyone who would listen. "Human witchcraft. That's the only explanation. No alpha in his right mind would choose a creature without a wolf over the daughter of a noble pack." The whispers spread like poison. Aisling tried to ignore them. She focused on learning her new duties, on studying the traditions and customs of the Luna's role. Cormac assigned tutors to teach her the pack's history, and she threw herself into the lessons with fierce determination. But everywhere she went, she felt the stares, the judgment, the simmering hatred of wolves who saw her as an intruder, a pretender, a threat to everything they valued. And through it all, Siobhan watched, waiting, planning. The first attack came a month after the announcement. Aisling was walking through the lower corridors, the servants' pathways she still preferred over the grand halls, when 3 she-wolves cornered her. She recognized them. They were members of Siobhan's entourage, wolves who had come from the Silverwood pack as part of the alliance negotiations that now lay in ruins. "Look at her," sneered the tallest one, a wolf named Maeve with copper hair and cruel eyes. "The alpha's pet. So pretty in her fine clothes. So convinced she belongs among us." Aisling kept her voice steady. "I don't want any trouble." "Then you shouldn't have spread your legs for our alpha." Maeve stepped closer. "Tell me, little human, what tricks did you use? What potions did you slip into his wine? No wolf with honor would choose a creature like you. The alpha chose me of his own will. I've done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong." Maeve's hand shot out, gripping Aisling's throat and slamming her against the stone wall. "You've destroyed an alliance that took decades to build. You've humiliated Lady Siobhan in front of every pack in Ireland. You've made our alpha a laughingstock." Aisling couldn't breathe. Claws pressed against her windpipe, and she felt blood begin to trickle down her neck. "We should end this now," one of the other wolves said. "Make it look like an accident. No one would question it." The human tripped, fell down the stairs, broke her fragile little neck. "Tempting," Maeve agreed. "But Lady Siobhan has other plans. She wants the human to suffer first, to truly understand what she's stolen." She released Aisling, who collapsed to the floor gasping. "This was just a warning," Maeve said. "Next time we won't be so gentle." They left her there, bleeding and trembling, and Aisling didn't move for a very long time. She didn't tell Cormac about the attack. She knew what would happen if she did. He would kill them, Maeve and her friends, and probably Siobhan too. And then the alliance with the Silverwood pack would shatter completely, and war would follow. Aisling had read enough history to know how pack wars ended. In blood, in fire, in hundreds of dead wolves on both sides. She wouldn't be the cause of that. So she wore high-collared dresses to hide the bruises. She stayed in the main corridors where there were always witnesses. She never went anywhere alone. And she watched Siobhan watching her, and she knew, with the certainty of prey in the presence of a predator, that this was far from over. 3 months after her mating to Cormac, Aisling began to feel ill. At first she blamed the stress. The constant pressure of her new role, the endless lessons, the barely concealed hostility of half the pack. It was enough to make anyone sick. But when the illness persisted, when certain smells began to turn her stomach and certain foods became impossible to eat, she began to suspect something else. Something impossible. "You're with child," the pack healer confirmed. Her old face creased with wonder. "I don't understand how. The mating of a wolf and a human has never produced offspring before, but there's no doubt. You carry the alpha's heir." Aisling sat in stunned silence. Child. Cormac's child. The heir to the Blackmore pack. "Does the alpha know?" the healer asked. "Not yet. You should tell him. He'll want to know immediately." Aisling nodded, but her mind was racing. Child changed everything. A child made her position permanent, unassailable. No one could question her right to be Luna if she bore the next alpha. But it also made her a target. If Siobhan learned about the pregnancy before it was publicly announced, Before the child could be protected by the full force of pack law, Aisling placed a hand over her still flat stomach. "I need to think," she said. "Please don't tell anyone. Not until I've spoken with my mate." The healer hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish, Luna." She found Cormac in his study that night, poring over maps and correspondence from the other packs. The candlelight caught the silver in his hair. He was aging, she realized, the stress of leadership taking its toll, but when he looked up and saw her, his face softened. "You look pale," he said, rising immediately. "Are you unwell? I need to tell you something." He crossed to her in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a deep breath. "Cormac, I'm pregnant." She watched the words hit him, watched the confusion give way to disbelief, then to something she had never seen on his face before. Oh, pure, unguarded, terrified hope. "You're certain?" The healer confirmed it this morning. "I don't understand how it's possible, but—" He kissed her, cutting off the rest of her sentence. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." "Yes." He dropped to his knees before her, pressing his face against her stomach like he could somehow feel the tiny life growing inside. When he looked up at her, the iron alpha was gone. In his place was just a man who had been alone for so long, who had never believed he could have this. "I love you," he said. "I love you, and I swear on my life that nothing will happen to you or our child. I will protect you with my last breath." Aisling ran her fingers through his hair, and for a moment, she let herself believe that everything would be all right. She should have known better. The pregnancy was announced at midsummer. By then, Aisling was beginning to show a gentle curve beneath her gowns that sent the pack into a frenzy of speculation. The heir to Blackmore. The first child born of a wolf-human mating. The living proof that their alpha's controversial choice had been the will of fate. Even Aisling's critics began to soften. A Luna who bore an heir was a Luna who deserved respect, regardless of her origins. She found herself welcomed into circles that had previously been closed to her, invited to gatherings where she had once served wine. But Siobhan didn't soften. If anything, the pregnancy made her more dangerous. "She knows she's running out of time," Cormac told Aisling one night, holding her close in their bed. "Once the child is born, once there's an heir, her claim on me becomes worthless. Whatever she's planning, she'll have to move soon. Then we should send her away. Back to her pack." "I can't. Not without proof of wrongdoing. The Alliance. Damn the Alliance." Aisling turned to face him. "Our child's life is more important than politics." "I know. And I've increased security. You're watched at all times, even when you don't know it. I have wolves loyal to me and me alone tracking Siobhan's every move." He stroked her face. "Nothing will happen to you. I won't allow it." But Cormac, for all his power, couldn't watch everything. And Siobhan was very, very patient. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Aisling never saw it coming. It began with kindness, the most dangerous weapon of all. Siobhan approached her at a public feast, her beautiful face arranged in an expression of humility. "Luna Aisling," she said, bowing her head. "I owe you an apology." Aisling felt every muscle in her body tense. "Do you? I've behaved abominably. My jealousy blinded me to the truth, that Alpha Cormac has found his true mate, and I should accept that with grace." Siobhan's green eyes were wet with apparent tears. "I've spent these past months in prayer and reflection, and I've come to understand my errors. Please forgive me." Every instinct screamed at Aisling to reject the apology, to see the trap beneath the pretty words. But the whole pack was watching. And if she rejected an olive branch extended in good faith, she would look petty, cruel, unworthy of her position. She had to play the game. "I appreciate your words," Aisling said carefully. "Perhaps we can move forward from here." Siobhan's smile didn't reach her eyes. Over the following weeks, Siobhan became Aisling's shadow. She appeared at meals, offering friendly conversation. She sent gifts to Ashling's chambers: sweets, books, beautiful fabrics for baby clothes. She publicly praised the Luna at every opportunity, painting herself as Ashling's greatest supporter. And slowly, Aisling began to wonder if she had been wrong. People could change, couldn't they? Perhaps Siobhan really had realized the futility of her resentment. Perhaps she really did want to make amends. Cormac didn't trust it. He watched Siobhan with cold eyes, and his wolves continued their surveillance. But nothing happened. Month after month, Siobhan was a perfect friend. She helped Aisling prepare the nursery. She held her hand during the difficult nights when the baby kicked and sleep wouldn't come. She became, against all odds, a confidant. By the time Aisling entered her final month of pregnancy, she had almost forgotten to be afraid. That was exactly what Siobhan was counting on. The night the child was born, everything changed. The labor was long and difficult. 23 hours of agony, the healers rushing in and out, Cormac pacing the corridor because tradition forbade him from the birthing room. When it was finally over, when the tiny cry rang out into the night, Aisling was barely conscious. "A boy," the healer said, placing the blood-slicked bundle in her arms. "You have a son, Luna." "Son. Near." She looked down at the small face, at the dark hair already matted against the tiny skull, at the eyes that blinked open to reveal Cormac's grey. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Let me clean him," Siobhan said, because of course Siobhan was there, because she had woven herself so thoroughly into Aisling's life that her presence at the birth seemed natural. "You need to rest." Aisling hesitated. Every instinct told her to hold her son close, to never let him go. But she was so tired, so drained. The healer was pressing a cup of something hot into her hands, insisting she drink, and the baby was crying, and Siobhan was smiling, and she drank. The world began to blur. "What?" She tried to hold on to her son, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. "What's happening?" "Shoo." Siobhan took the baby from her limp grasp. "Just sleep, little human. Sleep, and when you wake, everything will be different." The last thing Aisling saw before darkness claimed her was Siobhan's smile. And this time it reached her eyes. When Aisling woke, she was alone. She was lying on a cold stone floor, and her body ached in ways she couldn't name. The room was small, barely more than a cell, with no windows and a single door reinforced with iron. "Hello." Her voice was hoarse. "Is anyone there?" Silence. She tried to rise, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed back to the floor, and that's when she noticed the blood. It was everywhere. On her shift, on her hands, pooling beneath her body. Far too much blood for a normal birth. What had happened? The door opened, and a wolf she didn't recognize stepped inside. He was young, with nervous eyes and a face that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with his task. "Where is my son?" Aisling demanded. "Where is the alpha? What's happening?" The wolf didn't answer. He set down a tray of food, bread, water, nothing more, and turned to leave. "Wait, please, just tell me where my baby is." The door closed. The lock clicked. And Aisling screamed. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence. 3 days of cold food and colder stone. 3 days of not knowing whether her son was alive or dead, whether Cormac was searching for her, whether anyone even knew she was gone. On the 4th day, the door opened again. This time it was Siobhan. She swept into the cell like a queen entering her throne room, her golden hair immaculate, her green eyes bright with triumph. "Look at you," she said, circling Aisling like a predator sizing up prey. "The mighty Luna reduced to this. It's almost sad, really. Where is my son?" "Safe. For now." Siobhan crouched down, bringing her face level with Aisling's. "He's a beautiful boy, you know. Looks just like his father. I almost feel guilty for what I'm about to do. If you hurt him." "Hurt him? Why would I hurt the Alpha's heir?" Siobhan laughed. "No, little human. I'm not going to hurt your precious son. I'm going to raise him. As my own." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Cormac would never. Cormac doesn't know. Siobhan stood, smoothing her gown. You see, when I took you from the birthing room, I made sure to leave behind evidence. Blood. Signs of a struggle. And of course a letter. Written in your own hand, perfectly forged, confessing your true nature. What are you talking about? The letter explained everything. How you had seduced the Alpha through human witchcraft. How the child wasn't his. Couldn't be, because humans and wolves don't produce offspring, but rather the result of an affair with a human lover. How you planned to pass off the bastard as the heir to Blackmore and watch the great pack crumble from within. That's a lie. That's Cormac knows me. He would never believe. He believed enough to stop searching for you. Siobhan's smile was poison. It's been 4 days, Aisling. 4 days, and no rescue has come. Because the Alpha is convinced that his mate betrayed him. That his son isn't really his. That you were never anything more than a human snake in the grass. Aisling's blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? Siobhan pulled a folded paper from her gown and held it up. This is the official decree, signed by Alpha Cormac himself. You have been formally declared a liar and a traitor to the Blackmore pack. The penalty for such crimes is death, or in your case, something more permanent. She unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. For the crime of deception, the human known as Aisling O'Brien shall have her tongue removed, that she may never speak lies again. She shall be banished to the far territories, forbidden to set foot in Blackmore lands on pain of death. Her child shall remain with the pack, to be raised as the Alpha's heir. You can't do this. I already have. Siobhan tucked the paper away. In 3 days you will be brought before the pack. Your tongue will be cut out, and you will be thrown from our lands like the worthless creature you are. And your son, your beautiful perfect son, will call me mother. She leaned down one last time, her breath hot against Aisling's ear. You never should have reached above your station, little human. This is what happens to those who forget their place. Then she was gone, and Aisling was alone with the terrible truth of what she had lost. They came for her on the 3rd day. 4 wolves, faces cold and closed, dragging her from the cell and into the blinding light of the courtyard. The sun was high overhead, and the heat pressed down like a physical weight. The entire pack had gathered to witness her judgment. 300 wolves, standing in perfect rows, watching as she was forced to her knees on the ancient execution stone. The stone that had seen 1,000 deaths. The stone that would drink her blood before the day was done. Alpha Cormac stood on the raised platform at the front of the crowd. Aisling barely recognized him. The man she had loved, the gentle wounded man who had held her in the garden and whispered promises against her skin, was gone. In his place stood a statue carved from ice and fury, his grey eyes empty of everything except cold rage. Siobhan stood beside him, one hand resting on baby, Aisling's son, wrapped in fine white cloth, cradled in the arms of the woman who had stolen him. Cormac! The name tore from her throat. Please, you have to listen. The prisoner will be silent. Cormac's voice was devoid of emotion. She will speak only to admit her crimes. I have committed no crimes. The letter was forged. Siobhan took our son from me. Everything she told you is a lie. Enough. He descended from the platform, each step measured and deliberate, until he stood directly before her. I have read the letter. I have seen the evidence. I know what you are. You know nothing. Aisling's tears fell freely. You know only what she wanted you to see. Look at me, Cormac. Look at me and remember who I am. For one moment, one terrible precious moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Something that might have been doubt. But then Siobhan spoke. The witch is trying to enchant you again, my Alpha. Don't listen to her lies. And just like that the wall came back up. The cold returned. Proceed with the sentence, Cormac commanded. The executioner, the scarred wolf named Declan, stepped forward with his curved blade raised. Open her mouth, he said. Two wolves forced Ashling's jaw apart. She could taste iron already, could feel the terror turning her blood to ice. The blade was cold against her tongue. For crimes against the Blackmore pack, Declan intoned, you are sentenced to silence. May you never speak lies again. He raised the blade. And then, Mother! The word rang out across the courtyard like a bell. Every wolf froze. Because the word had come from the child in Siobhan's arms. The 6-month-old infant who shouldn't have been able to speak at all, let alone form coherent words. The child who was looking directly at Aisling with his father's grey eyes. Mother, he said again. The silence was absolute. Then Siobhan began to laugh, a high, nervous sound. An infant's babble, she said quickly. Nothing more. He doesn't know what he's. He spoke. Cormac's voice was strange. Hello. He looked at her and he spoke. It's meaningless. Babies make sounds. It doesn't. He called her mother. The alpha turned slowly to face Siobhan, and Aisling saw something terrible awakening in his eyes. Something that had been buried beneath grief and rage and lies. Give me my son, Cormac said. Of course. Siobhan's smile was fixed, frozen. Of course, my alpha. She held out the child. And the child began to scream. Not a cry of hunger or discomfort. A scream of pure terror. Tiny arms reaching past Siobhan, reaching toward Aisling. No. Siobhan clutched the baby tighter. He's just fussy. He needs to. Give me son. There was no room for disobedience in that command. The alpha power rolled off Cormac in waves, pressing down on everyone in the courtyard like a physical force. Siobhan handed over the child with shaking hands. The moment the baby was in Cormac's arms, the screaming stopped. The child looked up at his father with those uncanny grey eyes, then turned his head toward Aisling. Mother, he said for the third time. And Cormac finally understood. What happened next would be remembered in Blackmore for generations. The alpha turned on Siobhan with a roar that shook the very stones of the fortress. His wolf was at the surface, fur rippling beneath his skin, eyes burning gold, teeth lengthening to fangs. What have you done? I don't know what you, the letter. What have you done? Siobhan broke. All her careful composure, all her calculated cruelty, shattered like glass under the weight of the alpha's rage. She fell to her knees, sobbing, confessing everything. The drugged wine at the birth, the forged letter, the months of careful manipulation. She was just a human. Siobhan screamed. Just a worthless human. She didn't deserve you. Didn't deserve any of this. Silence. The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than all his roaring. Cormac turned to Aisling. She was still kneeling on the execution stone, the taste of her own terror on her tongue. She watched him approach with eyes that held no hope. Because even now, even knowing the truth, she wasn't sure he would choose her. He had believed the lies. He had signed the decree. He had stood there and watched as they prepared to cut out her tongue. Some things couldn't be forgiven. Aisling. She said nothing. He fell to his knees before her. Their son held between them. Tears streamed down the face of the most powerful alpha in Western Ireland, and his voice broke on every word. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Failed you. I believed lies because it was easier than facing the truth, that I wasn't worthy of you. That I never was. She still said nothing. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to make this right. I'll spend the rest of my life trying if you'll let me. Please, Aisling. Please. She looked at him. This man who had hurt her so deeply, who had loved her so fiercely, who had believed the worst of her when he should have known better. Then she looked at her son. At the miracle child who had spoken his first word to save her life. Who had looked at her with those ancient, knowing eyes and called her what she was. Mother. She reached out and took her baby from Cormac's arms. Held him close for the first time in 6 days. Felt his tiny heart beating against her chest. Her, Aisling said, nodding toward Siobhan. What happens to her? Whatever you decide. Cormac's voice was raw. Her fate is in your hands. Aisling considered. She thought about the months of fear. The attacks in the corridors. The stolen birth. The 3 days alone in a cell, not knowing if her son was alive. The blade at her tongue. She thought about revenge. And then she thought about the child in her arms, who would grow up hearing stories about his mother. Who would learn what kind of woman she was by the choices she made now. Banish her, Aisling said. Strip her of her pack ties, her family name, everything. Let her wander the world knowing what she lost. But don't kill her. Siobhan looked up, disbelief and relief warring on her face. Mercy, she whispered. After everything I've done. Aisling met her eyes. This isn't mercy. This is me refusing to become what you are. You'll live with that for the rest of your life. She turned away, and she didn't look back. Recovery was not a straight line. There were nights when Aisling woke screaming, certain she was back in that cell, certain her son was gone forever. There were days when she couldn't look at Cormac without seeing the cold stranger who had condemned her. Their son, named Finn for the legendary Irish hero, grew stronger every day. And though the healers couldn't explain it, his ability to speak remained. Not just single words but full sentences, far beyond what any child his age should be capable of. He's special, the pack healer told them. There's magic in that boy. Magic from both worlds. Aisling held her son close and believed it. The pack rallied around her. Those who had doubted her, who had believed Siobhan's lies, came forward with apologies and offerings. It wasn't enough. Nothing could erase what had happened, but it was a start. And slowly, painfully, Aisling began to trust again. Not Cormac. Not yet. That would take longer. But she trusted herself. She trusted her instincts. She trusted the fierce protective love that burned in her chest every time she looked at Finn. She had survived. She would continue to survive. And one day she would thrive. The turning point came 6 months after the trial. Aisling was walking through the gardens. The same gardens where Cormac had first kissed her, a lifetime ago, when she found him waiting. He looked older, thinner. The weight of his guilt was slowly crushing him, and everyone could see it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said before she could speak. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for anything except a chance to show you who I can be, to prove that I'm worth trusting again. And if I never trust you, he closed his eyes, then I'll spend the rest of my life loving you from a distance. I'll watch over you and our son, and I'll never ask for more than you're willing to give. Aisling studied him. This was the man who had seen her when no one else would. Who had loved her fiercely, recklessly, completely. Who had believed her capable of betrayal because he had never truly believed anyone could love him back. His demons weren't gone. Neither were hers. But maybe, just maybe, they could face them together. One chance, she said. One. You fail me again, and I take Finn and I leave this place forever. No arguments. No pursuit. You let me go. I swear it. Then we start over. From the beginning. You court me properly this time. No secrets. No lies. Complete honesty, even when it hurts. Anything. She held out her hand. He took it. And in the garden where their story had truly begun, they started writing a new chapter. Time, as it always does, moved forward. Finn grew from a miraculous infant into a remarkable child. His gift for speech never faded. If anything, it grew stronger. By the age of 3, he was holding conversations with the pack elders. By 5, he was reading texts that challenged adults. By 7, he was recognized as the most gifted heir the Blackmore pack had ever produced. But more than his intelligence, it was his heart that made him special. He had Aisling's compassion, her ability to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. He spent hours in the servants' quarters, learning the names and stories of every human who worked in the fortress. He advocated for better treatment, better wages, better living conditions. The pack is everyone, he told his father once. Not just wolves. Everyone who lives under our protection deserves our care. Cormac looked at his son with wonder. "You're going to change everything," he said. "I know," Finn replied simply. "That's why I'm here." As for Aisling and Cormac, their second courtship was nothing like the first. There was no secrecy this time, no stolen moments in dark corridors. Instead, there were long conversations by firelight. Walks through the territory where Cormac shared stories of his childhood, his fears, his dreams. Nights where Aisling let herself be vulnerable, let him see the scars that Siobhan's betrayal had left on her soul. It was messy, it was painful, it was real. And slowly, so slowly, the trust began to rebuild. The day Aisling finally let Cormac kiss her again was 3 years after the trial. Finn was asleep in the nursery, and they were sitting in the gardens watching the sun set over the western hills. "I'm not whole," she warned him. "Part of me will always remember what happened. Part of me will always be afraid." "I know. And you accept that." He took her hands in his. "I accept all of you," he said. "The broken parts and the beautiful parts. The fear and the courage. The woman who scrubbed floors and the Luna who commanded a pack. I love every piece of you, Aisling. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it." She kissed him then. Not because she had forgiven him completely. That would take more time, might take forever. But because she was ready to try. Because she wanted to believe in the future they could build together. And because, despite everything, she still loved him. Years passed. Finn came of age and began his formal training to become Alpha. He was beloved by the pack, humans and wolves alike, and there was no doubt that he would lead them well when his time came. Aisling, now in her late 30s, had become more than a Luna. She was a symbol, legend. The human servant girl who had risen to rule, who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger, who had raised a son destined to change their world. Other packs sent delegations to meet her. Young women, human and wolf alike, came to learn from her. She established schools for the human servants, teaching them to read and write and dream of more. "You've created a revolution," Cormac told her one night, watching her work on curriculum for the newest class. "I've created opportunity," she corrected. "What people do with it is up to them." "Same thing, isn't it?" She smiled, and in that smile, he saw the girl who had poured his wine at the winter solstice so many years ago. The girl who had changed everything. On the 20th anniversary of their mating, Cormac gave Aisling a gift. It was a document, yellowed with age, bearing the official seal of the Blackmore pack. "What is this?" "Read it." She unfolded the paper and began to read. And as she read, her eyes widened. This abolishes the servant class entirely. This gives full citizenship to every human in Blackmore territory. This changes everything. "I know." Cormac took her hands. "It should have happened years ago. It should never have been necessary in the first place. But I wanted to do this right. I wanted to make sure it was permanent, enshrined in law, impossible to undo." Tears streamed down Aisling's face. "Cormac, every human child born in our territory will have the same rights as a wolf. They'll have access to education, to land ownership, to pack protection. They'll never be invisible again. How long have you been working on this?" 20 years. He smiled. "Since the day I first saw you scrubbing my floors and realized that the true strength of a pack wasn't in its wolves. It was in its heart." She threw her arms around him and held on tight. And in that moment, everything they had survived, the pain, the betrayal, the long road to healing, felt worth it. 50 years. That's how long Aisling O'Brien Blackmore served as Luna of the Blackmore pack. When she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep surrounded by her son and grandchildren, the entire territory mourned. Wolves and humans alike lined the roads for her funeral procession, throwing flowers and whispering her name like a prayer. Alpha Finn gave the eulogy. "My mother was not born a wolf," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "She was not born powerful or privileged. She was born human in a world that saw humans as less than nothing. But she became everything. She showed us that strength isn't about fangs or claws. It's about standing up when the world wants you to kneel. It's about loving when you've been given every reason to hate. It's about building bridges when others want to burn them. She saved my life before I was born, and then she spent the rest of hers saving everyone else's. We called her Luna. We called her Legend. We called her the mother of the revolution. But I just called her Mom. And I will carry her with me every day until we meet again. The statue stands in the central courtyard of the Blackmoor Fortress to this day. It shows a woman, human, unbowed, unbroken, holding a child in her arms. At her feet are inscribed the words that Finn spoke at his birth, the words that changed everything. Mother. And beneath that, the inscription that Aisling herself requested. To those who were told they were nothing, you are everything. Guys, if this story moved you, if you felt something, don't leave without letting me know. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from and let me send you a hug. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to survive the impossible. Because stories like this, stories of pain and perseverance, of love tested and proven true, these are the stories that remind us who we are and who we can become. I'll see you in the next one.